I've spent the last decade helping more than 3,000 families stay rich because of systems they put in place. And once you understand them, you'll see why wealth disappears in one generation for some and grows for others. Pillar number one, the family office and generational wealth. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they think about generational wealth is assuming that leaving money behind is enough. I've seen families with real wealth lose control of it simply because they passed down money without passing down a system. When you look at wealth being passed from generation to generation, it starts with someone in the family who is usually really good at something and was able to create wealth. But often, what happens is that when that person dies, their money goes to the kids and everything stops there. The kids might be able to preserve some of the money, but it's up to them now. They are the ones responsible for growing it. And most people have a hard time being responsible with money. When you look at families like the Rockefellers, they often rely on one or usually multiple trusts that own major assets like businesses, real estate, investments, and even life insurance. Here's an example. Let's say that you build a net worth for your family of $10 million. As you get older, you start to think, I'd like this money to keep growing after I'm gone. How do I prevent my kids and grandkids from wasting the money? Well, while you're alive, if the kids want money, they need to ask you for it. If the money is going to be used for something smart, you say yes. Now, if your kid cannot clearly explain what they're going to do with the money, you say no. When you eventually die, you want to make sure that same yes or no process is put in place. So you set up a trust. The trust can own all of your assets. If the kids want money, they need to ask the trust. And you wrote the trust, so your rules and your principles are alive forever within the trust. Now, how they actually ask the trust is usually by asking board members. These board members are appointed by the trust to review and authorize money decisions. These board members could be family, and they could also be outside advisors. So let's say that Junior wants to go out and start a tech company. Now he's really smart and he's got the skill set, but he needs $1 million to start everything. So he asks the trust. The board approves the $1 million, but they also draft an agreement that outlines the terms. For example, the $1 million might be a loan, so it has to be repaid. And the business will be owned by the trust. Now, Junior can still be treated like an owner, and he still gets some of the profits, but the business is under the umbrella of the trust. The reason why is because this keeps control of the assets, and it also prevents wealth from being squandered. So going back to you, when you were alive, you grew the family net worth to 10 million because you were responsible. You're writing that same responsibility into your trust documents. And you have a responsible board, family members and outside advisors as part of your family office to help make the best decisions. As responsible decisions are made, that is what continues to grow the family net worth, but it's all under the umbrella of the trust. Here's the takeaway. I see two things with wealthy families. The first is control of the assets. Specifically, the assets are placed under a trust, and the trust has laws that state what the money can be used for and sometimes when it can be used by certain people. This simple step prevents so many problems from occurring. The second thing is more psychological. Everyone wants money. It could be to buy things that are worthless, or it could be to use it for things that make more money. The problem is that most of the time we make bad choices with our money, especially when we're young. So if you have laws in a trust that force good choices to be made, it prevents bad choices from occurring. Wealthy families that stay wealthy are doing things like this. Pillar number 2, establish that trust. Imagine you've built wealth for decades, but the moment you step away, it's out of your hands. That's exactly why trusts are not just for the extremely rich, but they're for anyone who cares about protecting what they've built. A trust doesn't become important once you're rich, it becomes important when control matters to you. Here's why I set up my trust. If I die, I want Tara to be taken care of, and I also want my employees to be taken care of. For the business, I have a trust that controls a key man life insurance policy. So if I die, the trust makes sure that that money is used responsibly. For example, the money can be used to make sure that employees are still paid and to go out and hire a new CEO. For Tara, the trust makes sure that she's taken care of and no one tries to take money from her or takes advantage of her. So for example, if I die, the trust receives all of my personal life insurance policies. The trust then pays her a certain salary, but if she wants or needs more money, she can get it. But first, there are two people that Tara and I put in place that talk with her and see exactly what that extra money will be used for. Most things are probably going to be fine. But if it's a case where someone's asking her for $1 million to invest in some new crypto startup or something like that, and the person has no clue what they're doing, yeah, that's not happening. The thing is, I trust my wife more than anyone else, but she's also one of the sweetest and nicest people on the planet, and she always wants to help everyone. So the trust is meant to add protection the same way that I would try to protect her if I were alive. The thing is, when I'm alive, her and I will talk about investing in a business or doing something with our money, and that prevents us from doing something dumb. A trust makes sure that the same thing is going to happen if I were to die. Now, if Tara and I both die, the trust spells out exactly what happened to the money and where it goes. This prevents things like probate, unnecessary delays, potential taxes, legal issues, and emotional decision-making inside of the family, which I don't want, and frankly, think no one wants. The value of having a trust is that you're putting in place a set of instructions that continue to operate even when the original person is not there to present what they wanted. When you see families with big businesses, real estate, or other assets, they almost always have a trust in place to protect the wealth and make sure that it is used in a responsible manner. If you leave a lot of money or a valuable asset and don't have that trust in place, it can create a situation that just tears the family apart, or the money just disappears into the wind. If everything is spelled out in a trust, you avoid those problems. You don't have to be ultra wealthy to need a trust. Having a trust will just force better planning. You'll be asked questions like, what assets need protection? Who controls decisions if something were to happen unexpectedly? What should happen to your business, your property, or other investments? What should the family sell, and what should the family keep? The value of a trust is clarity. It prevents future family stress because important decisions are all made up front. Pillar number 3, a life insurance trust, also known as an ILIT. One of the most overlooked problems in wealth planning is that even when families do everything right when building assets, they often don't realize how quickly taxes, timing, and liquidity issues can force those assets into bad decisions later. A lot of wealth gets lost not because the assets failed, but because the family needed cash at exactly the wrong time. A lot of families will use a trust for control and clarity, just like we talked about earlier. But they also use it for estate planning and creating liquidity when it matters most. For example, let's say there's a family, there's mom, dad, and 3 children. Mom and dad have done very well, and they've built a real estate empire that is valued at $100 million. Current estate tax rate is 40%. Now, mom and dad have what is called their lifetime gift tax exemption, which currently in 2026 is $15 million per individual. So we've got mom and dad and their $100 million real estate portfolio, and when they eventually pass, they plan to pass that to their 3 children. They want to divide it equally because they feel that is fair. First, we've got the lifetime gift tax exemption. Dad has $15 million, mom also has $15 million. So what this means is that the taxable estate, which initially was $100 million, is now $70 million. The gift of $15 million each helped knock down the taxable estate value, which is nice. But we still have a $70 million taxable estate, and what that means is 40% of $70 million is subject to estate taxes. What's that number? Well, if you take a calculator, you'll find that it's $28 million. That will be the tax bill. Now, due to some recent laws that have been passed, there are things that can be done to spread that out over time. However, that's still a large amount that needs to be paid in taxes. Where this creates a problem is if your money is tied up in real estate or other illiquid assets, it can sometimes be challenging for families to pay the tax. So the question is, how can they solve the estate tax problem? Well, a popular strategy is what is called an irrevocable life insurance trust. Here's what they do. First, they establish a trust. Second, they open a life insurance policy, in the example we just talked about, on mom and dad. The trust owns the policy, which means the policy is not part of mom and dad's taxable estate. The trust is the beneficiary, which means it receives the life insurance benefit when mom and dad die. Here's how I usually see families fund these life insurance policies. The trust owns the policy and also pays the premium. The trust starts with no money, so mom and dad need to give the trust money. How do they do that? Well, mom and dad are set up as what are called donors of the trust, and the 3 children are set up as what are called beneficiaries of the trust. So you have 2 donors and 3 beneficiaries. Each donor can make a tax-free gift to the trust up to $19,000 per year. And they can do this for each beneficiary. So donor number 1, mom, can gift $19,000 per year for each beneficiary. That's times 3, that's $57,000. Dad can do the same. That's another $57,000. So the total annual gift is $114,000. That $114,000 is put into a trust bank account, and then the $114,000 is used to fund a big life insurance policy. So the annual gift is tax-free. The cash value can also be accessed tax-free, and the death benefit is paid out tax-free. This strategy is meant to create liquidity, which will help pay taxes that will be due on an illiquid estate. Pillar number 4, business owners. Here's something I see all the time. Business owners think their wealth only exists while they're alive and running the company, but when they can't be there, that same money can vanish if it's not protected. Your business isn't just a business. It's the foundation of your family's wealth. Treat it like it belongs to the next generation, not just yourself. I recently met with a client whose net worth is about $250 million. Now, a lot of his net worth is in his company, and he also has a big key man insurance need, which means if he dies, the business is in trouble. What he wants is a key man life insurance policy in the amount of $100 million, and he wants the company to be the beneficiary. The problem is that he owns the business, which means if he dies, the business is going to be part of his taxable estate, and so is that $100 million life insurance benefit. So if he dies tomorrow, the $250 million assets in his name are passed, along with the $100 million death benefit. So that makes his taxable estate then $350 million. Now, I can tell you one person who won't mind that, the IRS, because the estate tax rate is 40%, but man, that is a big chunk of his money going out the door. So here's what we're doing. We're looking at what is called a private split dollar loan plan. You have 3 parties, the business, the key man, which we'll call John in this case. He also owns the business. And then an irrevocable life insurance trust. A $100 million life insurance policy is put on John's life. Now, the life insurance trust owns the policy, and the life insurance trust is also the beneficiary of the policy. The trust needs money to pay that life insurance policy premium. So the business loans the money to the trust to pay the premium. Here, you'll see what is called a collateral assignment put in place that ensures that the business is paid back the money it is loaned to the trust to pay the premium. Now, the trust then pays the premium with the money it received from the business. The trust then owes the business interest every year, and the interest rate is based on the AFR, which stands for applicable federal rate. Here's a question that comes up though. How does the trust get money to pay the business that interest cost every year? Well, John and his wife Jane give the trust money. Remember the $100 million real estate guy with the 3 kids? Well, John and Jane are doing something very similar here. If they have children, they can gift money to the trust by naming their children beneficiaries of the trust. Here's the thing. Say after 30 years, John wants to exit the company because he doesn't need key man life insurance anymore. It's fully functioning without him. The trust has borrowed the premium from the business for the past 30 years, so there is a big loan balance that the trust owes to the business, and it has to pay it back. Here's the exit strategy. The trust then takes a loan against the cash value of the life insurance policy it's funded all of these years, and that loan is tax-free, and that is used to pay the business back. Now, with that said, this is definitely a problem that 1% of people have. In fact, I'd say it's less than 1%. But at the same time, you can definitely learn a lot from it and implement some of the strategies and ideas that might apply to your situation. Regardless of where you're at, I'd ask yourself a few questions, such as, what happens to my business if I suddenly die and I can no longer run it then? If I need key man insurance, can I make the business a beneficiary? What if I own the business and it's worth a lot of money? How will that impact my estate tax? Or do I have a small business right now, but it's growing very fast, and I see myself getting to a level where trust ownership will provide more liquidity to my family? How can I ensure that my assets keep generating wealth for my family instead of being taxed away? A lot of times, we look at wealthy business owners and think they're on a different level. I'll never get there, or I'll never need to worry about that. But the thing is, if you listen to the stories from business owners that are multimillionaires or billionaires today, a lot of them started with nothing. They suffered for years on end, and then eventually they broke through. Those are the 4 pillars to creating wealth that will last for generations. If you enjoyed this video, I included another video here that I think you'll enjoy.